Should you buy a Toyota hybrid in 2024? Toyota hybrids for the longest time have been slowly establishing themselves as kind of the mainstream hybrid to buy. But lately you're having more electric cars and more options of hybrids and more plug-in hybrids, and kind of the market is saturated with hybrids. In today's video, I want to share with you, does it still make sense to buy a Toyota hybrid in 2024? What are the pros? What are the cons? And kind of everything in between right after this. So what is a Toyota hybrid? In case you're not familiar with how they work and what they mean and what's going on, what kind of systems we have. There are actually three kinds of Toyota hybrids today in 2024. There is a regular hybrid series parallel. This has been going on since basically the beginning, since the first generation Prius. This is a system, briefly, we're going to very briefly talk about it. You have an engine, gasoline engine. You have an eCVT transmission, not to be mistaken with the regular CVT. So basically this eCVT transmission has two motors. One of them starts the engine, charges the battery, and then a second motor that drives the wheels and charges the battery on regenerative braking. And the way it works is they both work together, or the motor will drive the car alone. You have a high voltage battery that charges up, and the two motors will assist at the same time to get better gas mileage and better emissions. Kind of the good and bad of that system is, the good is they're very efficient. And initially when they came out, they're very clunky and slow, and they're really not very user-friendly. If you're into cars, you're not gonna like them. Another bad thing about them, which just stays, the eCVT has a drone, so when you accelerate, it's gonna drone and drone, kind of similar to a CVT, but it's not an actual CVT. The good stuff is, it is very, very refined, and they've been getting really good gas mileage. Now that is the first kind of hybrids. The second one is, it's called 1MHV, and technically the two kinds that are left, they're 1MHV, but in a different orientation. The first orientation is the trucks, the Sequoia, and now the Tacoma, the new Tacoma, and then the Tundra. This system is really not meant for efficiency, it's meant for more power. So the orientation of the system is different. You have engine, you have a regular transmission, depends which model you have, 8-speed or 10-speed. And then in between them, you have an electric motor. That electric motor can start the engine, it can charge the battery, and can also drive through the transmission, the wheels, or it can boost the engine as the engine is driving. The pros of this system is very smooth. It doesn't really feel like a hybrid because there's no eCVT, the engine doesn't shut off a lot. It kind of gives more of a boost. Downside is, it's not as efficient. It's not really meant for better fuel economy and whatnot. It's really meant to give the engine a boost. That's why you find it in the trucks, so you can have more power. That's really the main advantage of it. And then the third kind of 1MHV, you'll find it in the likes of like the some Lexus performance SUVs, the TX, the RX. This is a system that is really meant for a more engaging drive. Usually they'll have a 6-speed transmission, same orientation. You have an engine, motor in the middle, 6-speed transmission. They make a lot of power. That's their main thing. They're still pretty efficient, unlike the trucks. You'll have more kind of electric drive only, but at the same time, it'll boost the engine, and it's a very compact unit. The pros of that one is, the cars are pretty fast. So if you want something a little bit faster, that is the one to get. They're very efficient. Not as efficient as regular hybrids, but still pretty more efficient than the truck system. The downside of it is, they're usually in the higher end models, so they're pretty expensive. The other downside to them, they're a tad bit on the complicated side. And they are relatively new, so reliability long term will be touch and go. I guess we will find out as time passes. So why should you buy a Toyota hybrid? What are the priorities when you're considering buying a hybrid? See, in the olden times, you had to buy a specialized model. Like, let's talk about one example. If you wanted a hybrid, you bought a Prius. You couldn't really get all the other models in hybrid. Yeah, eventually we got the Camry and the Highlander slowly started rolling in, but they felt very experimental at the beginning until they got better. But today, every single model almost is available in hybrid, and some models are hybrid only. So things have completely changed from the past. So If you are out shopping for a hybrid, this is my advice to you. The number one priority in your decision to buy a hybrid should be one of two things or both. You want a fuel efficient car and you want a reliable car. No thrills, no drama, no nonsense. These are the number one reasons you should consider a hybrid if these two things are top of your priority list. Now, if you are a car guy, you're into cars and you want an exciting, thrilling car that is going to move your emotions, you should already scrap hybrids out of your list, except the performance-oriented models like RX 500h, for example, or the ones that have the 1MHV system. Even though they're not the most exciting cars in the world, they're a bit more exciting than your average hybrid. If you are the kind of person that have a heavy foot, you're going to be driving 90 miles an hour all day long, or 85, or very high speed, majority of your drive, possibly hybrids are not for you. And the reason for that is hybrids actually get to a point where they become inefficient at continuous high-speed driving. Now, you drive normal speed limit, whatnot, that's perfectly fine. But if you're always driving high speeds, they become inefficient, and it kind of puts a severe strain on the hybrid system. It's simply not designed for that. It's a fuel-efficient car meant for sensible folks who are looking for something that is reliable and fuel-efficient, not someone who will be flying on the highway driving very fast. So if this is you, you should skip a hybrid. And lastly, if you're the kind of person that you live in a cold climate state and you have a summer home somewhere else, and in the winter you go to your summer home and this car is just going to sit for 6 months untouched, that's actually not a good idea unless you plan to move on from this car 3 to 5 years. It's not a good idea long term, because remember, the way hybrid systems work, you have a high voltage battery. Even though it is a very heavy duty battery and they've gotten a lot better over the years, it's still a battery. If you let it sit continuously year after year, you're going to degrade this battery. Eventually it'll fail, and actually high voltage battery failures are the number one reason people hesitate when they buy a hybrid. In my opinion, at least in 2024 and kind of the last 10 years, they are mistaken because things have changed a lot. We're going to talk about this a little bit in the video. So let's recap. Two very important things to consider when you're buying a hybrid. Fuel efficiency, reliability. These should be the top things on your list and nothing after it. Features and whatnot, yes, but we're not talking about an exciting car to drive, and we're not talking about a high-speed runner all day long, and we're not talking about a temporary car where we're going to use it for a few months and then it's going to sit the rest of the year. So which one is more reliable? A Toyota hybrid model or the exact same model in its gasoline counterpart? Well, if you asked me this question 5 to 7 years ago, I would have probably told you easily the non-hybrid model. They're less complicated, things are more basic, and life is good. However, because of emission regulations, because of everything else that's going on, gasoline cars have gotten so complicated in this. For the sake of getting better emissions, we have turbocharged engines, V8s are going, cars that used to have a V6 now have a 4-cylinder turbo, and all this stuff that got added on, and cars are getting extremely complicated, just regular gasoline cars. Because of that, and because how efficient hybrids were and how good emissions they got, they actually did not get as complicated with the regular gasoline cars. So actually in 2024, at least for the past 5, 6, 7 model years, things have flipped, because hybrids don't, for at least as of the day to film in this video, all Toyota hybrid models, with the exception of very few, especially on the Lexus side, they all have non-turbocharged engines. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, most of them have gotten their battery packaging and technology so packed down that things have been extremely reliable. And then starting, all their batteries now have a fan filter. And if you're not familiar what that is, batteries have a cooling system. And that cooling system is kind of the lifeblood of that battery. If the battery overheats, it severely degrades and we have issues. In the past, initially, they did not really think about this, and they just left them kind of wide open. They get lint in them, they get clogged, people were not educated about it, and they blocked them, and all kinds of problems happen. But towards the later years of the hybrid technology, they started adding filters, they started kind of bringing awareness to them and everything else, so people are now more familiar with them. They don't block them, they clean them, they service them, so batteries will last a lot longer, in addition to the batteries themselves being made better and more compact. So because of all that, it is really safe to say that in 2024, or the last 5 years, Toyota hybrids have actually gotten more reliable than their exact same car, non-hybrid model. You don't have turbos, you don't have really fancy, extremely more fancy new technology, except when you get into like the 1MHV, the trucks that have hybrid system, or the performance-oriented models that have a hybrid. When you get into the normal hybrids, parallel series, they've actually stayed relatively the same. The technology have peaked where we don't have a lot more new stuff getting added. If anything, they've gotten so efficient, things are being taken away from them and just they're still emission compliant. So yes, without a question of a doubt, hybrids have actually started to edge over gasoline cars, and they have surpassed them in reliability. Let's talk about some interesting hybrid trends and kind of observations. I think hybrid technology is reaching its peak. Every technology, folks, you innovate on it so much that it gets to a point where it's like, that's it. We have reached the top. There is no other way to make it any better other than just do something completely different. For the longest time, if you wanted to know what is the next generation or the latest and the greatest of Toyota hybrids, you looked at the Prius of all cars, because that was the original Toyota hybrid. First generation, never really trickled to any car. Second generation, trickled to some cars. Third generation, that was basically everything else it followed. Fourth generation, same thing. And now we arrive at the fifth generation with the latest generation Toyota Prius. The surprise thing is, and this is why I say I think we are peaking on the technology there, even though they officially, for the first time, called it the fifth generation hybrid system, it's actually not. It's actually a fourth generation hybrid system, slightly improved. Don't get me wrong, it's actually very well improved, and they really did that one well. But it's not a complete departure like the third to the fourth was. I mean, it was a complete different system. It was so much better when you went from the third generation to the fourth generation. It was a completely different system. But when you went to the fourth to the fifth, it was the same system. It had some improvements, so it basically feels like 4.5, not really 5. So that's what indicates we are actually peaking. And if you go drive a fifth generation hybrid system, namely the Prius or the Corolla Cross, they are just beautiful. They're seamless. The way they operate is just amazing. How, if you've ever driven a first generation Prius or even the second generation, and you go drive the newest one, it's like, wow, are we really driving the same model here? They are completely different. They're much better driving, a lot more efficient, and a lot smoother. They've gotten really good lately, folks. The other thing that Toyota is doing, you notice, because they are peaking with the hybrid technology, and there's really not much more to improve them. They're very efficient cars, and we're heading in that direction. They're starting to innovate in other things, like the 1MHV system. I think that's their new baby, and they're really going for it because they not only rolled it in a lot of trucks, they're working on another way to integrate it into normal car, kind of make the hot version of that car be faster and doesn't have the ECVT drone. But that's the direction they're heading towards, because there's not much else. We cannot make this system any better unless some new breakthrough in technology or whatnot. And it seems like Toyota is not really interested in electric cars. I mean, the BZ4X, I'm sorry, folks, they worked on it. It's just not good. It is possibly one of the bottom of the list electric cars, so they're not interested in electric cars. But the next avenue they're heading towards, I feel like, is plug-in hybrids, which we're not going to talk about a lot in this video, but plug-in hybrids are actually kind of hybrids on overdrive. They're exactly the same system, just with a larger battery, and you get actually a longer electric range. So one of the questions you always ask when reliability is high on your list of your car shopping, are these cars reliable? Yes, they are. But what about their cost of maintenance? Because what's the point of having a reliable car that's very expensive to maintain? So let's talk about hybrids. The first thing is, Hybrid maintenance is exactly the same as gasoline maintenance. You have your oil changes, transmission fluid, brake fluid, all the fluids and filters and whatnot. But here's the additional stuff that they have. Hybrids will have two cooling systems. There's a regular one for the engine. There's one for the hybrid system itself. Inverter, transmission in some models, that's just an additional cooling system. You have to service it at a very long interval. Best interval for that is 50,000 miles, 5 years. Just basically do two cooling system. Whatever the cooling system of the car, potentially expect to pay double that for two cooling systems. And off we go. It is hardly the end of the world, in my opinion, because there is something very cool about hybrids that makes up for that. You have negative maintenance. Because of the way hybrids are, there are things that are normally wear and tear items that people expect in a car. Well, they don't exist in hybrids. Things like a starter. Well, they don't have a starter. Alternator. Well, they don't have an alternator because the electric motor starts the engine, and inside that inverter, the brain of the system, it takes that high voltage from the battery, changes it to 12 volts, and that's what charges the battery. So you don't really need an alternator. And because of that, and because now we have electric water pumps and electric compressors and all that good stuff, you don't have a drive belt. So servicing that cooling system every once in a while is going to cost you a lot less than changing an alternator, starter, and a belt, and back and forth, and back and forth. And there you have it. And the most biggest thing about Toyota hybrids, not the 1MHV, not the trucks, not the performance models, just the regular Toyota hybrid, the transmission. I've been working on hybrids for a very long time, and I have seen everything from their inception all the way to now. And I can number how many hybrid transmissions I've replaced, both old and new. And usually the reason they've been changed is they've been modified or they've been severely neglected. Something abnormal, something even if you intend to neglect the car, you're not going to get there, or accidents. That's the only reason I've seen a transmission fail. Otherwise, I think no, and I am very confident in saying this, and this comes from experience, folks. I think there will never be an automatic transmission, CVT, even a manual transmission that is as reliable as eCVTs, especially the kind of the last 10 years. I have never seen one fail. They have gotten so good that just the thought of not having to deal with a transmission failure for some folks is a relief. So that is the God honest truth, folks. These eCVTs, and the word CVT kind of makes folks just decide this is not a good idea because of the horrible reputation of some CVT transmissions out there. One final reminder, they're not the same, and they are one of the most reliable transmissions you will ever see in any car. In addition to that, we talked briefly about the fan filter and how you have to maintain it, which, by the way, that's the number one maintenance. It's super simple. It's not expensive. It's just one additional filter in the newer ones. You can even do it yourself. I have some videos. Many other folks have videos as well. This is one item I actually recommend you do yourself. It's the very simple maintenance. It takes you no more than 5 minutes, once every 2-3 months. Check the filter. If it's dirty, clean it or replace it, and life is good, and you will not have issues with that hybrid battery. Speaking of the hybrid battery, I have seen kind of a decline in hybrid battery replacements, at least in my shop. I see second generation Prius, I see third generation Prius with extreme miles. I never see a fourth generation Prius. I see examples of these cars that have well over 300,000 miles, but the battery's fine. Things have gotten a lot better with batteries, folks. And you start looking at prices, they're actually dropping for the newer cars because there's no demand. It's as simple as that. Second generation Prius, third generation Prius was the last 2 years, and the second generation Prius being the top one. Third generation Prius, things are a little bit on the decline, but still. But anything fourth generation, batteries have been really good. Ever since they moved the location of the battery to underneath the back seat, which is basically everything from the last 5 years almost, things have gotten a lot better. That's a much better spot for it. It's easily breathes. It's a really inside the cabin where it's conditioned as well, and things have gotten really good with batteries. If you've been holding up on a hybrid because of the hybrid battery, I have good news. they're actually really on the decline for their failures, and that's really good. And they also extended their warranty on them from the factory, so that's another plus. So let's answer the most important question that you probably clicked on this video for. Should you buy a Toyota hybrid in 2024? Folks, things have completely changed in the last 5 to 7 years for hybrids. And if you are looking at a 5-year-old hybrid today, the same things apply for any car. Get it inspected, make sure it's in good shape, it has full service record, the car is taken care of. You will not be mistaken, as long as you're buying it for the right reasons. And let's reiterate those 2 top reasons. Fuel efficiency, reliability. That should be the top 2 reasons you would consider buying a hybrid. Now, long gone are the days of, for example, the 3rd generation Prius. And this is going to lead us to our next conversation and things to avoid with hybrids. 3rd generation Prius, the first few years. Head gasket problems, oil burning problems, EGR problems, and running problems, and then the grand finale of the battery going out. And then the 2nd generation Prius, super mega complicated cooling systems, engine burning oil, catalytic converter failure, and just things tend to not age well with older hybrids. But I'm noticing the newer ones, they're getting a lot better at aging well. Some of you will say, well, newer cars haven't been there for a long time. Actually, the initial problems with the 2nd and 3rd generation hybrid systems actually started showing up around 5 years. So we are at the same time again. And we have nothing with the new stuff. The batteries are better, EGR systems are better. The engines that they're using are much better because they're really mainstream engines. They're not kind of unique engines to the hybrids. And that's why they've gotten a lot better. Folks, buy a hybrid for the right reasons and understand what you're buying, understand what you need to do to it to keep it going without issues for years and years and miles, and you're not going to make a mistake. In the last 5-7 years, things have changed significantly. Avoid buying very old hybrids, even with low miles. Low miles are worse, actually, because these batteries have just been sitting and sitting. Because very old models like the original Prius, 2nd generation Prius, or the original Camry hybrid, or the original Highlander hybrid, unless you know its service history, be careful with these, because I see a lot of these come in for a pre-purchase inspection and they're just completely run down because people at that time did not understand hybrids. They didn't take care of them properly, and hybrids back then, they were modified regular cars. There was a lot of experimental stuff that didn't age well and kind of started the reliability downhill. But things in the modern times, the last 5-7 years, they are designed from the get-go to be a hybrid. It was not a regular model they kind of retrofitted the hybrid system to it. Now they design the model as a hybrid, and then the gasoline model, actually in some cases, is the kind of retrofitted model. And you have models like the Toyota Sienna hybrid. First year there was a few first year model issues, normal, but that's one solid van. It gets really good gas mileage. It's very functional. Not the best looking van in the world. Okay, it does have a few quirks, but it's extremely reliable. A lot of folks were disappointed that they don't have a non-hybrid model. It's only hybrid. I think that's the best thing they did, because if you own the previous generation Sienna that didn't have a hybrid, had a V6, they were really not fuel efficient at all. And many folks complain about them. They're not fuel efficient. It's a big van with a big V6. But the new one, hybrid, very fuel efficient, actually very impressive. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. Until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.